Child experiences afterlife after being hit by car. Welcome everyone. I had a near-death experience as a child. Before the accident, I had a strange encounter with a bat in my backyard. It seemed to suggest that I was meant for something greater. Shortly after, I found myself in front of a car on my bike, and everything changed. When the car hit me, I felt like I was being swallowed up, but there was no pain. On the other side, I felt eternal, existing beyond time and space. It's hard to explain, but my thoughts were different from those in the physical world. I saw a distant light and felt drawn towards it. Unlike other near-death experiences, mine didn't involve tunnels or encounters with angels. Eventually, I returned to my body, surrounded by people who had rescued me from underneath the car. I remember lying on the road, scared of going to the hospital. Then, a neighbor came to comfort me while we waited for the ambulance. Back then, I'm 62 years old now, things were different, more realistic you could say. The family doctor was the one who took charge. I can't recall if I was at the hospital or the doctor's office, but I woke up on the table as he was stitching my head. There was no anesthesia because there wasn't time for it. They needed to stitch me up quickly. So, as he was stitching, I blacked out, which was probably for the best, considering I wasn't under anesthesia. After they stitched me up, I woke up in a hospital bed with a band-aid around my head. A few days later, I was discharged and back home with the band-aid on my head. When I went back to get my stitches out at the doctor's office, I remember holding a metal hot wheel in my hand and accidentally crushing it. It was surreal. After the incident, I kept the experience to myself. I didn't share it with anyone, not even my family. I was just a kid trying to process what happened. I had a child's mind when it all occurred, and even though I had glimpsed something beyond, I was still trying to make sense of it all. It's kind of crazy if you think about it, how my mind prepared me for getting run over by a car. I had some knowledge from reading encyclopedias as a kid, but my parents stopped buying them because they were expensive. So I had a little bit of everything, and I was still piecing it all together. I kept mostly to myself until I turned 16 and legally could leave home. Then I struck out on my own. I delved into studying politics and religion, mostly on my own, through word of mouth, observing and asking questions, like attending church and listening. Later, I became a truck driver for a few years, and during that time, I became more withdrawn, barely making eye contact with people. Then, I transitioned to working in a casino after going back to school. I became a multi-competent hospitality worker and worked as a dealer, which I enjoyed. But then COVID-19 hit and things changed. I moved to Newfoundland, where I plan to start a bed and breakfast for some extra income and retirement security given the impact of COVID-19. This sharing of my experience is just a step in my journey. You can't sum it up in an hour or even a day. It's about the other side, eternity. Flesh has its limitations and blessings, as every human knows. We live on Earth, under the sun's heat, but beyond that, there's so much unknown, even in space exploration. We don't know until we get there, if we ever do. As for life beyond Earth, I believe we're alone in the universe. Life might exist within our solar system, but outside of that, it's improbable. It's a question humanity grapples with. Is there a God? I had a glimpse of eternity, so I know it exists. I plan to write a book to share more about my near-death experience. It's not a complex matter. It's about life, eternal life. I guess the professionals can ask questions and I can answer them. It's just that what I saw, that's what I experienced, right? One thing I keep saying to myself all the time is, how can a child decide to kick back and relax until they're older, then start talking about this even before kindergarten? Making that choice without any advice, who can you talk to, right? If you have a near-death experience as a kid and come out of that, sure, you hear kids talking about seeing angels or talking to Jesus, but I never had any of that. I went to a church and a pastor told me I had an out-of-body experience, and that's about it. I said, yeah, but this is how it went down for me. So you can't take away that I had a brush with something, I guess you could say an angel or whatever it was, over the tree line that tapped me into the spirit to prepare me for being run over by a car. But I was alone. I never saw other people, never saw angels. I guess if God already talked to me, there's no reason for me to respond. When I did come to my senses in my backyard as a kid, I did look up and say, Hey, why did you put me back? I was eternal. Now I'm a kid in my backyard. Whether I answered myself or it was divinity, I got the impression that it's because I've given you a life. Whether that was my own mind or the spirit speaking to me, I don't know. But that's what sets my NDE apart from every other one I've heard. I'm not saying I'm special or anything like that. This has probably occurred in other people, I imagine. So, before kindergarten, I read in an encyclopedia that scientists did experiments with a dog, a Labrador, and a person on the verge of death. They made a measurement. The measurement of the dog stayed the same, whereas the measurement of the human body had a slight percentage less. This has been studied for a long time, and I guess, yeah, that's question time. Or I would have to start writing a book. There's really no big spiel. If you thought of yourself as a robot that woke up in the world and decided to sit down for 1,000 years and continue the conversation after 1,000 years, that's basically what I am. Basically, my spirit has just kept to itself, and my decision was to open up at this point in life. I'm 62 years old, so there were no cell phones, no computers. I was in a public school in Ontario, Canada, and every morning we would stand and listen to the national anthem of Canada and the Lord's Prayer, Our Father. After the NDE, that was my experience, and it kind of ended when I got into grade 5, I think. That's when they stopped doing that, or maybe when I was stepping into high school, which was grade 7 or 6. But I was the kind of student that did nothing. If I got homework, I would throw it in the bushes on the way home. I knew about religion because I was baptized in a Catholic church, but we didn't really attend regularly. We celebrated Christmas, and I learned the Lord's Prayer from school and my mother. My prayers would often become conversations, as if I were talking to my father, being honest about what was bothering me. No one can dictate your relationship with God or whether God exists. I was surrounded by the world's influences, TV, news, books, people talking, all bombarding me. So, as a child, I found solace by listening to the ticking of my Timex watch each night, which helped me focus on something concrete amidst the chaos. I've contemplated life deeply, knowing that conversations should be spiritual. I've absorbed a lot of information, but don't claim to know everything. I filter and reflect what's given to me. Conversations need to engage the spirit. I've always felt a sense of eternity after my brush with the other side. While I didn't talk to angels or anything like that, I did taste a bit of eternity. I've read that the brain is like any other organ, despite its electrical activity. It's an essential part of us, yet thoughts themselves are somewhat mysterious. I guess thoughts swirl around your head, and your brain selects and acts upon one, but it doesn't generate those thoughts, it just chooses. I see myself as a dragon, not literally breathing fire, but more like a solitary dragon swimming in an ocean. I live near the ocean, and when I see water, I envision it as my domain, mine alone. I've been swimming since I was a baby, probably because my dad was in the Navy. Babies instinctively swim, and I've always felt like a fish in water. If you painted a picture of me, it would be of a serpent or dragon effortlessly navigating the ocean's depths. As I started to move and listen to all the near-death experiences, maybe if I had moved towards the light, the outcome would have been different. Describing eternity is impossible. It's more about experiencing it. Every near-death experience is unique. Even if you had 100, they'd all be interpreted differently. It's like when doctors collaborate after listening to near-death experiences. They might deny the personal message or have conflicting viewpoints. For me, I decided at a young age to roll with life's punches until I could stand up and either fight back or shrug it off. Before COVID, I left my trucking job for the casino industry, but even then, I felt like I was still getting pushed around, like a snowball rolling downhill. Now I finally feel like I've found my footing. About 4 or 5 years ago, I had a plan, but life kept moving along, and I believe things happen for a reason. Let me tell you about my boots. They're custom-made military cleats, and every time I look at them, I see the journey I've taken so far. My plan was to be carefree and spend time with my soulmate, embracing life's changes like the shoreline on Earth. When I had a near-death experience, it felt like a message to stay calm in the face of danger. My experience was unique, and honesty is crucial to understanding it. I don't claim to have all the answers, I'm just sharing what I've learned. Life is always changing, like the shoreline, and I've learned to roll with it. I'm not perfect, just a person trying to find my way in the world.